What would you do if you discovered that the woman your son was about to marry was the same person who destroyed your family 12 years ago? Would you speak up? Would you risk losing him? Or would you take matters into your own hands? On a crisp Saturday afternoon in June 2020, inside a modest chapel on the east side of Cleveland, Ohio, a wedding ceremony dissolved into a crime scene. A bride dressed in white never made it to her vows. A groom never got the chance to say, "I do." And a secret buried under a decade of pain erupted in front of God, guests, and stained glass windows. Before we go deeper, if you love true crime stories that twist, haunt, and force you to question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, betrayal, and justice, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves stories that keep them up at night. And drop your city in the comments. We want to see where the True Crime Files TV family is watching from. Now back to Cleveland. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 p.m. Guests filled the pews. Flowers lined the aisle. Soft music echoed through the chapel. But hidden beneath one guest's loose-fitting black dress was a .38 revolver, cold, loaded, and waiting. No one in that room knew that before the pastor could finish his opening prayer, a single gunshot would shatter a young couple's future, reveal a buried truth, and end a life. The bride collapsed instantly. Soft white fabric drowned in red. Screams ricocheted off the chapel walls. And when police arrived minutes later, they found a mother standing over her son's fiancée with the weapon still in her trembling hand, whispering the same 5 words over and over. "She killed my husband first." To understand how a wedding turned into an execution, we need to go back. Not days, not months, but years, to a version of Cleveland where desperation ruled, loyalty was currency, and betrayal carried a price no one walked away from clean. Let me introduce you to Marisol Turner, 43 years old at the time, and a survivor in every sense of the word. She didn't learn survival from books or therapy. She learned it from the cold streets of Cleveland's Collinwood neighborhood, where you either hardened up or got swallowed whole. By her late 20s, Marisol was tangled deep in street life. She wasn't running entire crews, but she was connected. She knew who moved what, who owed who, and who to avoid when the air felt wrong. She carried herself with the kind of quiet intelligence that made dangerous men trust her and underestimate her at the same time. Marisol wasn't alone. She had someone, Andre Turner, her partner in hustle and in life. Andre wasn't loud or flashy. He disliked attention. He moved product because it paid the bills faster than any legit job he could find. He kept his head down, handled business, and dreamed of something better. Together, they survived. Not thrived. Survived. And in 2003, they welcomed a son, Marcus Turner, a boy with big brown eyes and a laugh that made Marisol believe there was still something good worth fighting for. By the time Marcus was 5, Marisol and Andre were trying, really trying, to leave the streets. Andre wanted real work. Marisol was saving every spare dollar. They were planning for a future that didn't involve danger lurking around every corner. But escape doesn't come clean. And for them, it didn't come at all. Because in the fall of 2008, Andre Turner crossed paths with a woman who would change everything, Keisha Blackwell. Keisha was 27 at the time, and she was everything Marisol wasn't. Loud, brash, beautiful in a sharp-edged way. She wore bright wigs, purple, red, electric blue, and tattoos climbed across her collarbone and arms like stories she never bothered to explain. She carried herself like someone who'd already survived too much and wasn't afraid to take more if she wanted it. Keisha and Andre met through business, a pill connect. One small deal turned into several. Then came late-night calls. Laughing. Touching. Marisol saw the change immediately. Streets teach you to recognize danger long before it arrives. And Keisha? She was danger wrapped in perfume and a tight shirt. Andre swore it was nothing. Swore Keisha was just business. Swore Marisol was imagining things. But Marisol's instincts had kept her alive for decades, and now they were screaming. Money started disappearing. Andre stayed out later than usual. Phone calls he would have taken in the kitchen, he started taking outside. And before Marisol could figure out what was happening, the streets answered for her. On a freezing November night, Andre said he had to make a quick pickup. 2 hours, he said. Be right back. Marisol kissed him goodbye and watched him step out into the cold. She never saw him alive again. At 12:16 a.m., her phone rang. Not Andre. A friend from the neighborhood. A voice shaking so hard it barely formed words. Sit down, he told her. And then, they got Andre. The details came slowly, painfully. Andre walked into a setup, an ambush behind an abandoned auto shop near St. Clair. 3 men. A robbery. 2 bullets to the chest. No witnesses. No cameras. No arrests. Case closed before it even opened. But Marisol refused to let it die. She dug quietly, listening, watching, asking questions in the spaces where men whispered more truth than they intended to. And every trail, every rumor, every half-confession led to the same person. Keisha Blackwell. She wasn't just Andre's side fling. She was the leak. She fed information to the crew who robbed him. Sold him out for $6,000. The price of a life. Marisol didn't go to the cops, they wouldn't care. She didn't go after Keisha, she had Marcus to protect. But she made herself a promise. If the day ever came, she would make Keisha pay. Years passed. Keisha disappeared from Cleveland, rumored to be in Atlanta, then Detroit, then who knew where. Marisol left the streets. Took a warehouse job. Raised Marcus alone. Forced herself to bury her rage under routine and exhaustion. But the past never stays buried. And in 2019, that past walked right back into her life, wearing a smile, a new wig, and her son's hand. Years passed after Andre's death, and Marisol forced herself to focus on raising her son, Marcus. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart. She woke up every morning at 5 a.m., made him breakfast, packed his lunch, and walked him to school before heading to her shift at a warehouse off East 55th. The job was hard, lifting, sorting, hauling pallets, but it was honest. It kept the lights on, kept food on the table, and kept Marcus away from the streets that had taken his father. At night, after Marcus went to sleep, Marisol would sit alone in the dim light of the living room and think about Andre. She replayed their last conversation. She replayed the plans they had made. Mostly, she replayed the way the truth had unraveled. How the whispers, the rumors, the half-answers all pointed back to one name. Keisha Blackwell. Her rage didn't scream. Didn't explode. It simmered quietly beneath her ribs, lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. She hid it well. She had to. If she crumbled, Marcus would crumble too. But no matter how deeply she buried that rage, it never died. Marcus grew up into a good young man. Respectful. Hard-working. Broad-shouldered like his father, but soft-spoken like his mother. He stayed out of trouble. No smoking, no drinking, no running with the wrong crowd. He graduated high school with decent grades and went straight into construction work. By 25, he had his own apartment on the west side and dreams of starting his own contracting business one day. Marisol was proud. She had done everything she promised herself she would do. She raised him far away from the lifestyle she and Andre once lived in. She protected him from the truth. She gave him a chance. And then, one afternoon in the fall of 2019, Marcus called her with a voice full of excitement she hadn't heard since he was a kid. "Mom, I met someone." Her stomach tightened. Not because he couldn't have a relationship. God knew she wanted him to have love. But because something in his tone stirred an old fear she couldn't explain. "What's her name?" Marisol asked. He answered cheerfully. "Her name's Keisha." Her heart stopped. She swallowed. "Keisha what?" "Keisha Blackwell." The world tilted. It was the same name she had carried like a wound for 12 years. The same woman who had sold Andre to the highest bidder. The same woman Marisol had vowed, quietly, privately, to punish if she ever got the chance. Marcus kept talking, unaware of the war breaking loose inside his mother's chest. He said he met Keisha at a gas station off Detroit Avenue. He said she'd complimented his work boots, joked that he looked too clean to be a real construction worker. He said they talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. Cleveland food spots, the Cavs, how winters always felt personal here. Keisha told him she had just moved back to Cleveland after years in Atlanta, trying to start fresh. She worked at a hair studio downtown. She was 39, nearly 14 years older than Marcus, but he didn't seem to care. He said she had a good heart. He said she made him laugh. He said she understood him. Marisol couldn't breathe. She asked him to describe her. Marcus did, bright red hair, tattoos along her arms, nose ring, warm smile, confident energy. It was her. It was undeniably her. The woman who had destroyed her family had somehow found her way into Marcus's life. Whether by coincidence or something darker, Marisol couldn't tell. Apocalypse disguised as love. She spent the next week in a fog, working, cleaning, sleeping, while her mind spun in circles. She couldn't warn Marcus, not yet. How could she tell him the woman he was falling for was the same woman who got his father killed? If she told him too early, he'd think she was paranoid, controlling, bitter. He would pick Keisha. Love blinded children faster than anything else. So she waited, hoping, praying. It was a different Keisha. Cleveland wasn't small, but it wasn't that big either. The streets had a way of making circles overlap. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe there were two Keisha Blackwells. She needed to see her face. Marcus invited her to meet Keisha the following month. They were having dinner at a small restaurant in Ohio City. Marisol agreed, but inside she felt like she was walking toward a ghost. Marcus arrived first, Keisha beside him. When Marisol stepped into that restaurant and saw the woman sitting across from her son, it was like being punched in the spine. The hair was different, long red waves now, but the tattoos were unmistakable. The eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. The eyes of someone who had looked at Andre Turner and seen profit. Keisha recognized her instantly. The flicker in her eyes lasted only a second, but Marisol saw it. She always saw it. Still, Keisha extended her hand and smiled as if they were strangers. It's so nice to finally meet Marcus's mother. Marisol shook her hand, feeling the chill of Keisha's rings. Rage crawled up her throat, but she forced herself to sit, forced herself to smile, forced herself to pretend. Dinner was torture. Keisha played the role of polite, charming, put-together partner. Marcus beamed the entire time, proud, happy, in love. When Keisha left for the restroom, Marcus leaned in and asked, "What do you think, Mom?" Marisol wanted to scream. Wanted to confess everything. Wanted to drag him out and make him see the devil sitting across from them. But she couldn't. Not without proof. Not without risking losing him forever. So she said the only lie she could live with. She seems nice. What she didn't expect was what happened next. When Keisha returned, she hugged Marisol goodbye. And as she leaned close, she whispered two words into her ear. "I'm sorry." Then she walked out with Marcus, leaving Marisol shaking in the middle of the restaurant. Keisha knew exactly who she was. And she didn't care. Marisol drove home from that dinner feeling sick, hands shaking on the steering wheel as the streetlights blurred in her vision. Keisha's whispered, "I'm sorry," replayed in her mind over and over like a curse that refused to fade. Not an apology. Not remorse. It was acknowledgement. A quiet confession wrapped in two soft words. Proof that Keisha knew exactly what she had done all those years ago, and exactly who Marisol was. But the question that kept clawing at her was why now? Why come back to Cleveland? Why approach Marcus? Why entangle herself in the life of the son of the man she helped kill? Marisol couldn't accept that this was coincidence. Cleveland wasn't big enough for coincidence. Not in their circles. Not with their history. Over the next few weeks, Marisol found herself watching Keisha from a distance. Not obsessively, but intentionally. She'd drive past the salon downtown where Keisha worked, watching the warm neon lights continue past closing time. She'd see Keisha laughing with clients sweeping hair, answering phones. She looked normal. Ordinary. Like someone who'd simply rebuilt her life. But Marisol knew better. Monsters didn't always look like monsters. At home, Marcus was happier than Marisol had ever seen him. He called Keisha a blessing. He said she understood him in ways younger women never had. He said she made him feel wanted, respected, appreciated. Each word was a knife twisting deeper. Marisol tried to nudge him away gently. She mentioned the age difference. She mentioned how fast everything was moving. Marcus brushed every concern aside. "Mom, you just don't know her like I do," he'd say. "She's a good woman. She's changed." Changed? People didn't change like that. Not that easily. Not that completely. Not after selling a man out for a handful of cash. But Marcus didn't know that. He couldn't. As winter settled over Cleveland, Keisha and Marcus grew even closer. Keisha started spending most nights at his apartment. She left little things, a toothbrush, a silk bonnet, her favorite lotion, like soft markers of permanence. Within 2 months, she had a key. Every time Marisol visited, Keisha was there. Cooking, cleaning, laughing, acting like a wife without the title. And Marcus glowed. By early 2020, he started talking about their future. Not just casually, seriously. Marriage. Kids. A house. He even mentioned wanting Marisol to walk him down the aisle someday. The thought made Marisol's stomach twist. Walk him down the aisle, toward the woman who helped murder his father? No. She couldn't let that happen. But she needed more. Proof. Something concrete. Because if she accused Keisha outright, Marcus would shut down. He'd take Keisha's side. Love made fools out of even the smartest men. So Marisol approached Keisha again, but not aggressively, not impulsively. She went to the salon one cold Wednesday afternoon, stepping inside with the smell of hair bleach and coconut oil thick in the air. The receptionist recognized her from before and hesitated, but Keisha appeared before she could say anything. Their eyes met. And this time, Keisha didn't bother with a smile. "Let's go outside," she said quietly. They stepped into the winter air, their breath fogging in front of them. They stood between 2 cars, just feet apart, the cold slicing through their coats. Marisol didn't waste time. "What do you want with my son?" Keisha didn't flinch. Didn't fake confusion. She answered immediately. "I didn't know who he was at first," she said. "I swear I didn't." She explained how she'd met Marcus at the gas station. How he'd been kind, respectful, different from men she'd known before. She said she didn't know he was Andre Turner's son until their first date, when he casually mentioned his last name and his father's death. Keisha paused then, looked down at her hands. When she met Marisol's eyes again, they were glassy but steady. "I almost walked away," she said. "I knew I should have. But Marcus makes me want to be better." Marisol felt her jaw tighten. "Did you set Andre up?" Silence. A long, trembling silence. Then Keisha nodded once. "Yes." The word dropped like a stone into the space between them. Keisha said she was young then. Desperate. Surrounded by the wrong people. She said she thought it was just a robbery, not a murder. She said when she heard Andre had died, she fled Cleveland because she couldn't face what she'd done. "I've been trying to change," Keisha whispered. "For years. And meeting Marcus? It felt like God giving me a chance. Make something right," she hissed. "You destroyed us. You left my son without a father. You expect me to believe this is redemption." Keisha didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just said, "I love him. I'm not leaving him. You can tell him everything if you want. But I'm not walking away." And with that, she turned and went back inside, leaving Marisol shaking with fury and disbelief. Over the next months, things only escalated. Marcus and Keisha were inseparable. They laughed easily. They shared meals. They looked like a couple that had found something genuine. That terrified Marisol more than anything. Because what if Keisha had changed? What if Marcus was truly safe with her? What if this wasn't a plot or revenge or manipulation, but simply a twisted, awful coincidence? Marisol didn't know what to believe anymore. But everything became clear, painfully clear, when Marcus told her he was planning to propose. He bought a ring. He picked a date. He said Keisha was the love of his life. Marisol felt the world split open. She begged him to slow down. She begged him to think. She begged him to see what she saw. But Marcus didn't hear her. Love had already made him blind. Marcus proposed on a chilly evening in late March 2020. Cleveland had one of those nights where the wind scraped at your skin, but the city lights still glittered across Lake Erie like broken glass. He took Keisha to her favorite spot, the edge of Voinovich Park, right by the water, where the skyline framed the horizon and the waves hit the rocks in slow, steady thuds. He didn't have much money for a ring, not on a construction worker's paycheck, but Marcus had saved for months. He bought a simple gold band with a small diamond. Nothing extravagant. Just real. Just honest. The kind of ring a man buys when he's giving everything he has. When he dropped to one knee, Keisha covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. Marcus barely finished the question before she whispered yes. They went straight to Marisol's apartment that night. Not to ask permission, Marcus was a grown man, but to share the moment. To share their happiness. He walked through the door beaming, practically glowing. Keisha stood beside him, holding his arm, showing off the ring. Marisol tried to smile. Tried to be gracious. Tried to keep the room from spinning. "When's the wedding?" she managed to ask. "June 20th, Marcus said proudly. "Quick, but we don't want to wait." Quick. 3 months. 3 months to stop a disaster she could see coming like a train barreling toward her son. Marisol asked to speak with Marcus alone. Keisha nodded politely and stepped outside to wait in the car. The moment the door clicked shut, Marisol grabbed her son's hands, squeezing them tightly. "Marcus, please slow down. You barely know this woman." Marcus pulled his hands away gently but firmly. "I know exactly who she is," he said. "She's good for me. She makes me feel seen. She makes me feel enough." Marisol felt that like a slap. Wasn't she enough? Hadn't she raised him with every ounce of her strength? But Marcus wasn't done. "Mom, you've been alone for so long. Maybe you forgot what it's like to be happy with someone. I don't want that for me." The words weren't meant to hurt, but they did. Deeply. Marisol swallowed the pain, the anger, the fear. "Marcus, you're making a mistake." He shook his head. "No, I'm making a choice." He hugged her, tight, warm, hopeful, and then left. Marisol watched from the window as he walked back to the car. Keisha opened the passenger door for him, smiling gently. Marcus kissed her cheek before they drove away. Marisol's heart cracked open. Over the next weeks, things only got worse. Marcus started answering her calls less frequently. He stopped coming over for Sunday dinners. When they did talk, it was short, tense, clipped. Keisha was always nearby, always present, always a shadow between them. Marisol tried everything. She brought up the age difference again. She told him 3 months wasn't long enough to know someone. She tried to guilt him, reason with him, remind him of his father. Marcus brushed it all off. "Mom, I need you to trust me." But Marisol couldn't trust him. Not with Keisha in the picture. As the wedding date approached, Marisol's anxiety turned into desperation. She hired a private investigator, money she didn't have, to dig into Keisha's life. She needed something concrete, something undeniable, something she could put in Marcus's hands and say, "Look, this is who she really is." The investigator combed through records, associates, finances, everything. He came back with nothing. No active criminal ties. No suspicious calls. No hidden accounts. A clean record for over a decade. Just a woman who worked at a hair studio, paid her bills, and lived quietly. To the investigator, and to anyone who didn't know the past, Keisha looked normal. Reformed. Stable. Even good. But Marisol knew better. A clean record didn't erase blood. Still, without proof, she had no ammunition. No way to convince Marcus that the woman he loved was the same one who destroyed their family. Then, 2 weeks before the ceremony, Marisol's fear finally overpowered her restraint. She sat Marcus down in her living room. The same room where Andre once laughed, once held their son, once promised to make a better life for them. She looked Marcus in the eyes and spoke the words she had held in her throat for 12 years. She told him everything. She told him about Andre's death. About the setup. About the stolen money. About the 3 men who ambushed him. And most importantly, about Keisha's role in all of it. Marcus froze, staring at her like she was someone he didn't recognize. Mom, stop. Marcus, listen to me. She got your father killed. No. Stop. She admitted it to me. Marcus stood up, shaking his head violently. You're lying. I'm trying to save you. No, you're trying to control me. You never liked her. You've been judging her since day one. Marisol felt her chest tighten. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Marcus, I'm telling you the truth. No, he snapped. You're jealous. You're bitter. You're scared of losing me, so you're making up stories. The words cut deeper than knives. Marcus walked out, slammed the door, didn't call for an entire week. When he finally did, his voice was cold and final. We're still getting married. You can come if you want or stay away. But it's happening either way. Marisol felt trapped. If she didn't go, she'd lose her son forever. If she did go, she'd watch him marry the woman who destroyed their lives. She stayed awake for 3 nights straight, replaying every moment of the past 12 years. And on the 4th night, she made her decision. She would not let Keisha win. She would not let Marcus walk into a life built on blood. She would stop the wedding. Not with words. Not with warnings. Not with truth. But with the only thing the streets had ever taught her to trust. Force. June 20th, 2020 arrived with the kind of heavy summer heat that clings to your skin even before noon. The small East Side chapel Marcus and Keisha booked wasn't fancy. Just a humble building with wooden pews, worn hymnals, and sun-faded stained glass that cast soft colors across the floor. The kind of place where people prayed for new beginnings. But for Marisol Turner, there was no new beginning waiting. Only an ending. She woke before sunrise. She didn't eat. Didn't drink. She moved through her apartment like a ghost, steady but hollow. On her bed lay the dress she'd chosen, black, loose-fitting, long enough to hide what she needed to hide. Beside it, wrapped in a towel, was the .38 revolver she bought years ago. A gun she hoped she'd never use. A gun she now believed was her only remaining choice. She loaded it slowly, each bullet sliding into the cylinder with a metallic click that echoed louder than it should have. Her hands were steady. Her breathing wasn't. She strapped it to her thigh, adjusted her dress, looked at herself one last time in the mirror. Her red lipstick was bold, too bold for a wedding but perfect for war. By the time she arrived at the chapel, the parking lot was already filling. Guests stood outside fanning themselves, laughing, greeting one another. Marcus's co-workers. Keisha's salon friends. Aunts. Cousins. The people who believed this day was about love. Inside, the air conditioning hummed weakly. Soft music drifted from the speakers. Marcus stood at the altar in a crisp black tux, straightening his bow tie and smiling at everyone who approached him. He looked proud. He looked excited. He looked like a man moments away from the future he always wanted. Marisol's chest tightened. She took her seat in the 3rd pew on the left. Close enough to see everything. Far enough not to draw attention. Her sunglasses hid her eyes even indoors. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers brushing lightly against the hem of her dress where the gun waited. At exactly 3 p.m., the chapel doors closed. Guests sat. The music shifted. A soft piano melody filled the room. The doors reopened. And there she was. Keisha Blackwell, dressed in a fitted white gown that hugged her body. Her tattoos peeked from the neckline, swirling across her collarbone. Her red wig was styled in loose curls, bouncing with each step. Her nose ring caught the stained glass light, glinting like a shard of metal. She walked alone. No father on her arm, no bridesmaids escorting her. Just Keisha, head held high, the picture of confidence and rebirth. When she reached the altar, Marcus took her hands. Their fingers laced together effortlessly. They shared a smile that shattered Marisol's heart. The pastor opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman." Marisol barely heard the words. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Her breath grew shallow. Her chest ached with a pressure that felt like 12 years of grief, loss, betrayal, and helplessness collapsing inward all at once. She could feel Andre in the room with her. She could feel Marcus as a baby in her arms again. She could feel the night the phone rang. She could feel everything. The pastor continued, voice calm and steady. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." The words hit Marisol like a trigger being pulled inside her mind. Before she fully understood she was moving, she was on her feet. The chapel froze. Dozens of heads turned toward her. Marcus's smile faltered. Keisha's eyes widened, not in confusion, but in recognition. She knew exactly what was coming. The pastor lowered his Bible slowly. "Ma'am?" Marisol didn't answer him. She reached beneath her dress, fingers closing around cold metal, and drew the revolver. Screams erupted instantly. Someone gasped. Someone shouted for help. Marcus took a step toward her, panic flooding his face. "Mom, stop! What are you doing?" But Marisol couldn't stop. Not now. Not after 12 years of nightmares. Not after watching Keisha wrap herself into Marcus's life like she belonged there. Not after the truth had been ignored, denied, dismissed. She lifted the gun, aimed directly at Keisha, and spoke the 5 words that had haunted her since 2008. "You killed my husband first." Keisha's face changed. Her lips parted. Her eyes filled with something, fear, guilt, resignation. Maybe all 3. And then, the gunshot exploded through the chapel. The sound slammed into the walls, into the pews, into the bodies of everyone present. Keisha's body jerked backward, the white dress blooming with red as she collapsed onto the steps of the altar. Marcus screamed, a raw, animal sound that tore through the room. He dropped beside Keisha, hands shaking as he tried to lift her, hold her, stop the bleeding. It was useless. The blood poured too fast. Her breaths were shallow, then stopped altogether. Guests ran for the exits. Some cried. Some shouted into their phones for help. Others stood frozen, unable to comprehend the horror unfolding in front of them. Marisol didn't run. She stood still, the gun hanging loosely in her hand, her shoulders trembling. She watched the life drain from Keisha's eyes. She watched Marcus crumble beside the woman he loved. She watched everything she had tried to protect shatter beyond repair. When the police burst through the chapel doors minutes later, Marisol didn't resist. She placed the gun on the floor and raised her hands. Her fate, she knew, had been sealed long before the trigger was ever pulled. The aftermath inside the chapel was a blur of chaos, shock, and unfiltered grief. The moment officers stormed down the aisle, Marcus was still kneeling beside Keisha's body, hands soaked in her blood, murmuring her name like a prayer that refused to be answered. The guests had either fled the building or huddled in the corners, trembling and crying. The pastor stood frozen at the altar, clutching his Bible with white knuckles, eyes wide in disbelief. Marisol sat in the front pew, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The revolver lay on the floor where she dropped it, as harmless now as any object stripped of purpose. She didn't speak, didn't fight, didn't cry. When the officers approached, she lifted her wrists without being asked. They handcuffed her gently, almost respectfully, as if even they understood this wasn't a simple crime, but the eruption of something much deeper, older, and more complicated than any one moment could explain. As she was led out of the chapel, she paused. Just for a second, just long enough for her eyes to find Marcus. He looked up at her, face streaked with tears, mouth open in a silent question she couldn't answer. Then he turned away. Outside, the summer air felt sharp in her lungs. Sirens wailed. Bystanders whispered. Phone cameras recorded everything. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. At the police station, Marisol finally spoke. Not to excuse herself. Not to beg. She simply told the truth. Or at least, the truth as she had carried it for 12 long years. She told detectives about Andre. About the setup. About the whispers that pointed to Keisha. About the guilt that haunted every breath she took after her husband died. About the confrontation in the salon, the whispered, "I'm sorry," and Keisha's admission. But the detectives listened with the cold eyes of people who had heard too many stories, too many justifications. Stories without evidence were not truth, they were noise. They asked for proof. She had none. They asked for witnesses. She had none. They asked if she had reported Keisha in 2008. She had not. To them, it didn't matter what Marisol believed. It didn't matter what Keisha may or may not have done. It didn't matter that a decade of pain had hollowed Marisol into someone unrecognizable. All that mattered was this. She had brought a loaded gun into a church, she had aimed it, she had fired it, she had taken a life. In front of 50 witnesses. The charges were immediate and severe. First-degree murder. Premeditated. No possibility of mistake. Marisol was denied bail. Meanwhile, the city erupted in whispers and debates. Some said she was a murderer. Cold. Calculated. Unhinged. Others said maybe, just maybe, there was more to the story. That nobody walks into a church and pulls a trigger without a reason carved so deep it becomes part of their bones. Marcus disappeared from the public eye in the days after the shooting. Reporters crowded outside his apartment. Neighbors brought food, offered condolences, offered space. He didn't take any of it. He didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Didn't speak to anyone. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The moment his mother stood up, the gun, the words, the scream that tore itself out of his throat. The way Keisha looked at him just seconds before she fell. The way he reached for her, felt her warmth leaving her body as she slipped away. He tried to remember her laugh instead. The way she'd tease him about leaving tools in the truck. The way she'd hum when she braided her hair at night. The way she'd look at him like maybe, just maybe, they could both escape their ghosts. But the blood was louder than the memories. He didn't visit Marisol in jail. Couldn't bring himself to. Every time he thought about seeing her, rage and grief tangled together until he couldn't breathe. He kept asking himself the same 4 questions. What did I miss? Was she lying? Was my mother telling the truth? Or did she destroy everything because she couldn't let go of the past? He didn't have answers. Just an empty apartment filled with Keisha's things. A hairbrush on his dresser, her favorite jacket draped over the couch, a half-used bottle of shampoo in the shower. Little markers of a life interrupted. While Marcus drowned in questions, Marisol prepared for trial. Her public defender did what he could. He argued trauma. He argued grief. He argued that 12 years of emotional torture had pushed her past the breaking point. That she had acted not from malice, but from pain. But the prosecution had something stronger. The gun. The witnesses. The planning. The motive. They painted Marisol as a woman who had nurtured revenge until it grew into something feral. They said she'd waited for the perfect moment to strike. They said the past didn't excuse the present. They said justice couldn't bend for heartbreak. They weren't wrong. But they weren't right either. The trial lasted only 5 days. Marcus didn't testify. He couldn't. He sat in the back row, silent, eyes glazed, staring at the floor. When the jury returned, the verdict was swift. Guilty. Premeditated murder. Life in prison without parole. A single moment. A single trigger. A lifetime of consequences. As Marisol was led away, she didn't look for Marcus. She didn't want to see whether he hated her, pitied her, or simply couldn't bear to look at her anymore. Instead, she held one truth to her chest like a final, flickering flame. She had done what she believed was necessary. What she believed was right. What she believed Andre deserved. Even if the world never agreed. In the weeks after the verdict, Cleveland slowly shifted back to normal life. Or at least the closest thing to normal a city can find after a tragedy that rippled through neighborhoods, barber shops, diners, and church pews. The story dominated the news for a while. Mother shoots son's fiancée at wedding. It sounded sensational. Absurd. Like something out of a movie. But the people who lived it knew it was no movie. It was the fallout of a wound left open for more than a decade. Inside her prison cell, Marisol Turner adjusted to a life that felt smaller, quieter, and infinitely heavier. The concrete walls were cold. The nights were long. The silence, when it finally settled, was suffocating. For the first time since 2008, she had nowhere to run from her thoughts. She replayed everything. The moment Andre left the house for the last time. The phone call. The whispered confessions. The nights she lay awake watching Marcus sleep, promising herself she'd protect him from the same fate. And the moment she stood in that chapel, gun shaking in her hand, knowing there was no coming back. She told herself she acted for Andre. For justice. For Marcus. But now, alone in a 9x12 cell, she had to confront a darker truth. She had also acted for herself. For the rage she had carried so long it had become a part of her identity. For the helplessness she felt every time she remembered her husband dying alone in a cold alley. For the guilt of not stopping him from leaving that night. For the pain that had shaped every decision she made afterward. Revenge wasn't justice. Not really. But it was the only thing that had quieted the voice in her head screaming for closure. And now there was silence. But it wasn't peace. Across the city, Marcus Turner was facing his own version of a prison. His apartment no longer felt like home. Keisha's things were everywhere, a jacket on the couch, her favorite lotion on the nightstand, a hair bonnet on the pillow she used. He tried packing them away, but everything he touched brought back a memory. The way she'd laugh. The way she'd squeeze his hand. The way she'd talk about wanting a fresh start. And the way she died in his arms. Marcus didn't blame himself, not fully. But he blamed something deeper, something harder to name. He blamed fate. He blamed the street life he never asked to be born into. He blamed the ghosts of decisions made long before he was old enough to understand them. Most of all, he blamed the silence. The silence between his parents about their real past. The silence between his mother and the police in 2008. The silence that let trauma rot in the dark instead of being dragged into the light. And the silence that kept him from seeing the truth, whatever the truth even was, until it was too late. He didn't visit Marisol. He wanted to. He tried. He drove to the prison parking lot twice. Both times, he sat in his truck gripping the steering wheel until his hands cramped, unable to step inside. What would he say if he saw her? What would she say to him? Would she apologize? Justify herself? Beg forgiveness? Stand by her actions defiantly? He didn't know. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. He was grieving two women now, the fiancée he loved and the mother he thought he knew. Meanwhile, speculation swirled throughout Cleveland. Some said Marisol had done the right thing. That Keisha got what was coming to her. That the streets had their own brand of justice, and sometimes it was the only justice that mattered. Others said Marisol was delusional, blinded by grief, and clinging to rumors from people who barely knew the truth. They pointed out that Keisha had never been charged in Andre's death. That she'd lived quietly for years. That she'd been trying to start over. Both sides felt right. Both sides felt wrong. That's how tragedy works. It blurs the lines until nothing looks clear anymore. The police eventually closed their review of Andre Turner's case. Officially, it remained unsolved. Unofficially, no one cared enough to dig deeper. Keisha's family mourned her privately. They stayed away from reporters. They avoided interviews. Whatever demons she carried, they were buried with her. As for Marcus, he left his job a month after the funeral. He couldn't handle the questions. The looks. The whispers from people who didn't know him, didn't know Keisha, didn't know his mother or their past. He moved out of his apartment, changed his number, cut ties with everyone except a single childhood friend. And eventually, he left Cleveland altogether. Some say he moved to Columbus. Others say he went to Chicago. A few say he disappeared out west, looking for a place where no one knew his story. No one knew for sure. No one asked too many questions. Some grief is too deep for strangers to touch. Back inside the prison, Marisol aged faster than she realized. Her hair grayed. Her skin thinned. But her eyes remained sharp. Too sharp for someone who'd lost everything. She didn't get visitors. Not from friends. Not from coworkers. Not from Marcus. Her only company was memory. And memory was a cruel companion. She replayed her life the way some people replay old movies, hoping the ending might change if she watched it enough times. It never did. She wondered sometimes, if she had walked away in 2008, if she had forgiven Keisha in 2018, if she had trusted Marcus to make his own choices, would any of this have happened? Or was the tragedy set in motion long before she ever lifted the gun? The truth is, cycles of trauma don't end because people wish them to. They end because someone does something different. Marisol didn't do something different. She repeated the cycle, completed it, and passed the burden to the next generation. Whether Marcus would break it, no one knew. Not yet. Months passed. Seasons changed. The city moved on, as cities always do, shifting its attention to new headlines, new scandals, new tragedies waiting for their moment under the lights. But for the people directly entangled in the story, the ones who lived the nightmare, not just heard about it, nothing moved on. Nothing healed the way outsiders assumed it would. Inside the quiet routines of prison life, Marisol Turner drifted through her days like someone suspended between two versions of herself. There was the woman she used to be, the survivor, the mother, the fighter who worked double shifts to keep Marcus fed. And then there was the woman she had become, the one who walked into a chapel with a loaded gun, the one whose name would forever be tied to an execution dressed up as a wedding. In rare moments of stillness, Marisol wondered if she had truly protected Marcus or destroyed him. She remembered the way he looked at her that day. Shocked, confused, broken. And she remembered something else, something she had tried to forget. The small, fleeting look on Keisha's face before the gun went off. Not fear. Not anger. Something closer to acceptance. Almost like she knew the past had finally caught up to her. Marisol played that look over and over in her mind. Sometimes it felt like truth. Sometimes it felt like guilt taking on a new disguise. Even behind bars, the past had claws. But Marcus's wounds were deeper, different. He was the last living witness to a war he never signed up for, a war born long before he took his first breath. He spent his childhood shielded from his parents' history, protected from the truth of Cleveland's underbelly. He grew up believing his father died in a robbery gone wrong, never knowing his mother once navigated the same shadows she fought so hard to keep him away from. Now every truth was exposed. Every lie was broken apart. Every memory felt contaminated. Wherever Marcus went after leaving Cleveland, Chicago, Columbus, somewhere farther, he carried the same weight. The realization that love doesn't always save, that family doesn't always protect, that the past is never as far behind as people pretend it is. He carried the memory of Keisha's laugh, her touch, the way she talked about wanting a second chance at life. And he carried the image of his mother pointing a gun at the woman he loved. Two women. Two truths. Two versions of a story he never got to fully understand. Some nights, he tried imagining what would have happened if Marisol had told him the truth years earlier. Before he met Keisha, before they fell in love, before a wedding invitation. Became a death sentence. Would it have changed anything? Or would he have fallen for her anyway, drawn in by something neither of them could outrun? Other nights, he wondered if Keisha had truly changed. Was she trying to build a new life? Was she hoping to make things right in her own way? Or was she simply hiding from a past that finally found her? There were no answers. Just questions Marcus would carry for the rest of his life. As for the rest of Cleveland, the story became something whispered about at barbershops, discussed in Facebook groups, debated in break rooms. Some people called Marisol a monster. Others called her a protector. But everyone agreed on one thing. The truth in this story was muddy. Painfully muddy. Because even though Keisha may have caused Andre's death, she had never been charged. Never been investigated. Never been confronted by law enforcement. Her guilt lived only in the shadows. Only in whispers and assumptions and the confessions she offered privately. And Marisol, consumed by grief and rage, acted as judge, jury, and executioner. Some saw justice. Others saw tragedy. Most saw something too complicated to fit neatly into a category. In prison, Marisol kept waiting for one thing, a visit. One sign that Marcus still saw her as his mother, not the villain of his story. But the visit never came. And every day that passed made her wonder whether her final act had saved her son or simply severed the bond that once held them together. She often sat on her bunk, staring out the narrow window at the patch of sky she could see, imagining Marcus under the same sky somewhere far away. She wondered if he hated her, if he pitied her, if he would ever understand why she did what she did, or if he was grateful she would never have the chance to interfere in his life again. Over time, Marisol came to understand something painful. You can fight the world, fight the people who hurt you, fight the ghosts that follow you, but the hardest person to fight is yourself. Justice, grief, love, anger, none of them fit cleanly into the box she tried to force them into. The truth was messy. The truth always is. And the truth was this. Marisol destroyed 3 lives. Keisha never had the chance to answer for what she did. Andre's case remained unsolved. Marcus lost a fiancée and a mother in the same moment. There were no heroes in this story. No villains without their own pain. Just broken people making choices they couldn't unmake. In the end, what remained was not justice or revenge or closure. What remained was wreckage. The kind of wreckage left behind when love and trauma collide and no one walks away clean. If you've been watching this story from the beginning, ask yourself this. Was Marisol right? Was Keisha deserving of forgiveness? Was Marcus doomed from the start? What should justice look like when the truth is buried in shame, fear, and silence? These are the questions that linger long after the headlines fade. And now, as we close this chapter of True Crime Files 247, we want to hear from you. If this story gripped you, shocked you, or made you rethink what you know about love, betrayal, and consequences, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories that dig deep into the human mind and the darkness people carry. Share this video with friends who love true crime, psychology, and stories that spark real conversation. And most importantly, comment below with your perspective. Tell us what you think really happened. Tell us what you believe Marcus should have done. Tell us the lesson you pulled from this story. We read every comment. We value every voice. And we want to know how you interpret a story where truth and tragedy walk hand in hand. This is True Crime Files TV. Stay safe. And remember, not every past stays buried.